What's up, Otakuans? Welcome back to another episode of the Otaku Octagon. This week, I'm happy to bring back another installment of the Manga Corner with Volume 6 of the Rising of the Shield Hero series. While this volume only covers the first 3 episodes of Season 2, once again, there's plenty left to be said. As many people already know, Season 2 is undoubtedly the worst adapted season from the light novels, so we're going to spend the next few volumes covering exactly what you missed out on. If you're a Shield Hero fan just like myself, or you enjoyed knowing the true story from the light novels, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes of the Manga Corner. Without further ado, let's hop back into the story of Guardian Beasts and New Alliances with The Rising of the Shield Hero, Volume 6. Prologue, Calmira Superstitions. As always, our prologue gives us a brief backstory of everything that has happened in the past few volumes, including a brief introduction of all of our main players and their story. Returning to current events, Naofumi spots a merchant selling accessories to the public nearly 4 times the reasonable market price. Shamelessly flashing his accessory dealer certificate signed by that renowned businessman he met before on his travels, Naofumi scares the merchant into selling the pieces at 90% off to our hero. Chapter 1, The 7-Star Heroes. Resuming our story, Naofumi heads up a spiral tower to a room where he finds the other 3 heroes and the queen. It seems everyone is still stuck on Calmira until the storm dies down. After some small talk and thoughts on how weak and disappointing the other heroes' performance was during the last wave, the meeting finally began. The other heroes still felt that Naofumi wasn't being quite forthcoming with all of his cheats he was using so far, while he was steadily trying to convince them that he was only using the methods that they taught him. They fully believed that he wanted to keep the glory for himself until Naofumi punched Motoyasu in his face and to no effect. He then informs them that if one of them were to perish, Vittori explained that the waves will only get worse. He gains absolutely nothing from being in the spotlight while having to sacrifice everything. The other 3 heroes, obviously now embarrassed, are happy to change the conversation to the 3 otherworldly intruders. This then leads the conversation into differences between the 7-star heroes and the 4 cardinal heroes. These individuals were not always summoned from another world like the cardinal heroes, but sometimes were admired as normal adventurers and then selected as a 7-star hero. Oddly, this conversation happened later in the story, since the anime does nearly skip the events in this volume. The conversation then turns to the heroes receiving formal training. While Naofumi wholeheartedly agreed, the others were not so motivated. Here, Isuki, the bow hero, learns that Rishia was the one who came up with the idea to use the Rukolo to save the day versus Liark incoming. Naofumi was unsure how he and the rest of his party would take her receiving this praise due to the hierarchy. After the other 3 heroes leave the meeting, the Queen and Naofumi meet in private where she expresses how weak the other heroes are and how embarrassing it will be to send them around the world to quell the other waves. The plan so far seemed to move to Naofumi being the one tasked to travel from country to country and combat the waves while the other heroes stayed here in Melromark. Chapter 2, An Unhappy Girl. Following the meeting, Naofumi runs into a squirrel Kigurimi, Rishia, carrying all of her party's groceries. She refuses Naofumi's help, and Naofumi recalls again the hierarchy of Isuki's team. Even though Rishia was the biggest reason they survived that last wave, she still sat on the bottom of the totem pole and was treated no more than an errand girl. When Naofumi asks why she sticks around, he learns that she was that young maiden that Isuki had saved a while ago from a corrupt governor, and also the same girl that he saw him with as he left town the next day. Because of this, she feels she was indebted to him and wants to be by his side when he saves the world. Once back in his room, he met with Raftalia and Philo to tell them all about the meeting. But when he said they had to go fight the other waves, suddenly Philo's cowlick began to react, and Victoria talks to them and informs them that she will handle all the other waves while Naofumi and the other heroes train and grow a lot stronger and closer. Chapter 3, Framed Again. Our next chapter is one of the few scenes shown in the anime from Volume 6. Here though, Naofumi catches sight of what seems to be Motoyasu hitting on Rishia. Looking to warn him of her connection to Isuki, he quickly passes her off to Naofumi instead and tries to run off. Rishia is trembling in tears, so of course Naofumi expects the worst. But Motoyasu quickly explains and denounces this and says it's just because he's not good at this type of thing. Though Naofumi tried his best, he still couldn't get any answers. The next morning, he tries to find out more from Motoyasu about the situation, and he finally relents and tells Naofumi everything. As we know from the anime, when Rishia returned yesterday from shopping, she was accused of breaking one of Isuki's accessories. Though this was complete BS, Isuki and his party ran her off. Naofumi, after finding out the situation, quickly finds a shadow and finds out easily what was the real truth. But the kicker of it all, the shadow had already informed Isuki, but he chose to believe his party instead. With this new information, Naofumi is enraged and decides to confront Isuki, who eventually confesses that this was all a hoax and was actually meant to benefit Rishia since she's so weak and they all needed to protect her. With the truth finally being known, Rishia, who just so happened to walk up mid-conversation, runs off. Disgusted, Naofumi tries to knock some sense into the bow hero, but this only angers Isuki even more to the point he actually tried to pull his bow out and attack Naofumi, but the arrows were ineffective. Now scared, Isuki decides to fire off a skilled shot, but our shield hero easily snatches the arrow out of the air, snaps it with his fingers, and shoots off one more disgusted glare at Isuki before he runs off to follow Rishia. He then finds her as he does in the anime where she's outside trying to drown herself. But also like in the anime, Philo was there and she was able to save her. And then after that, she's invited to join the Shield Heroes party. After joining the party, Naofumi thinks on the best way to integrate her. Currently, Rishia was at level 68 and she specialized in both support and healing magic. And at her request, she is also equipped with the Peku Kigurimi. Chapter 4. Custom Order. Now that the offshore storms were finally calmed down, everyone including our heroes prepared to return to the castle. While preparing, Naofumi decides to check out all the shields that he unlocked during the last wave. And with this, the unlocking of the Dreaded Shield that allows him an additional airstrike shield. He also unlocked a bubble shield that allows him to fight in a bubble underwater. Next, Naofumi receives more materials from the Queen, so he then absorbs them all into his shield. Finally, after all this time, the party returns to the weapon shop. After talk about their level raising and the events of the last wave, Naofumi gives both Philo's and Raphtalia's weapon as well as the Kigurumi that he had earned to the weapon shop owner and asks if he could modify or create something even better. He also ordered a rapier with magical protection for Rishia after speaking with the blacksmith, and lastly requested improvements to his own armor. After returning to the castle, Naofumi runs into Nice Guy, who also had Kill in tow. Following the events before meeting Vittoria, the party managed to save some surviving slaves, and one of them so happened to be a childhood friend of Raphtalia's. Since then, he had been in the care of Nice Guy, but after some discussion, he also joined the Shield Heroes party with a promise to train relentlessly to fight alongside them for the next wave. One odd difference between the novel and the anime, Kill was nearly as tall as the current Raphtalia, unlike his childlike appearance in the anime. Now with the two newest members, Naofumi offers them both to be his slave. Now, let's go ahead and take a pause. If you're an anime only, this might sound a little bit weird to you because we don't get introduced to Kill even prospectively joining the party until season 3. But yes, here in the light novel, both Kill and Rishia are offered to be Naofumi's slaves. Chapter 5. Battle Advisors. As any sane person would be, Rishia and Kill are mortified at Naofumi's request. Kill even began to doubt his identity of the shield hero, and Rishia immediately decided to return home to her parents. Just as we saw in the anime, Naofumi and Ko explained the benefits of becoming his slave and assurance of their safety. After some deep thought, the two approved of the conditions. Fast forward to the slave sealing ceremony, both Rishia and Kill both ended up with powerful slave seals. Unlike the anime, the ceremony was actually performed at the kingdom so that they received the same seals as Bitch did, where it was always invisible unless it was activated. In order for the spell to work, he had to choose at least one rule, so he decided to prevent them both from ever being able to lie to him. After the ceremony was over, Naofumi checked both of their statuses and found that even though Rishia was level 68 compared to the rest of them, her stats were incredibly low. Following, the Queen informs the shield hero that she is outsourcing a combat advisor for their training. Naofumi orders Philo to go train Kill, and the remaining party members meet Eclair for the first time. The rest of the chapter shows the party training with Eclair, the new combat advisor, and displaying how strong Naofumi has become due to his leveling up and no formal training. Chapter 6, Hengen Muso Style. As we've seen so far, the anime decided to pick and choose what info they decided to adapt. Last chapter, we are introduced to a new reoccurring character, Eclair, through the premise of a combat advisor. This chapter, we are reintroduced to a second combat advisor selected by the Queen, a combat veteran and master of the Hengen Muso style. When alerted of their arrival, Naofumi went to the training grounds to find Rishia and the old woman, who Naofumi had previously saved and since then has supported them when she could. After a moment, Naofumi surmised that she was the new advisor, and she surprisingly informs him that Rishia has the highest potential for the cell. He also learns that the level cap for non-heroes was 100 and she was nearing that level. Just like with Eclair, the old lady evaluated everyone's strength through sparring. Easily overpowering everyone, she also displays her prowess in defense ignoring attacks. Thus, everyone's Hengen Muso training began. From this, Naofumi could potentially learn to defend against these defense ignoring attacks and learn to better manipulate his own energy to in turn strengthen his own special attacks. As for everyone else, the Hengen Muso style can easily be applied to martial arts to strengthen each of their own combat power. Chapter 7, Impossible Training. Impossible Training is the setup for the hero's next training arc. With the two new combat advisors on deck, the expectation was for all the heroes and their party to take part of the daily training, but that clearly wasn't their plan. After a few missed sessions, the other three simply saw this extra training as beneath them. When pressed, Ren as usual became combative and quickly ended up sparring against Eclair. What started out as a quip against her doubting her expertise soon ended in Ren being pushed to his combative limit and being forced to break a simple rule and use a name skill to avoid embarrassing himself. When confronted by his clear breakage of the rules, he of course makes excuses for himself and claims that he was actually holding back the whole time. Following the events at the training grounds, everyone is then informed of the mandatory Hengen Muso training in the mountains until the next wave begins. The hopes was through meditation and sparring, the heroes would finally get to the level that they needed to be at. Chapter 8, Life Force Water. After a day of training, the heroes and their parties returned to the castle at nightfall. While the mandatory training for the day was over, the shield party still planned for even more training with Eclair and the castle's wizards. As for Naofumi, this evening he decided to go visit the apothecary shop and inquire about their orders. While there, he asked the town's apothecary if he knew anything of soul healing water or magic water. From his description, he goes to the back and returns with an old tattered book with a recipe for life force water. To sum up his production, a combination of soul healing water and magic water must be filtered through using a magic stone, and since all three of these are rare and the solution offers no more than extra vital energy for the user, its production hadn't become popular. But even with such foreboding news, Naofumi still requests for a bottle, providing the necessary materials to the apothecary a day later. As the days pass, the days will consist of all the heroes' parties training throughout the day, and following after dinner, Raphtalia and Rishia will go train in both magic and swordsmanship. Philo and Kill also continued their own training regime. Kill had already reached level 25 from their extracurricular training. Naofumi also, in the meantime, receives his own growth after absorbing the soul, life, and magic water into his shield. He then unlocks the ether, spirit, and aura shields. With these, he unlocks skills for auto magic or SP regeneration, while the aura shield unlocked from the life force water had yet to show any skills. Naofumi then decides to experiment with the life force water by using Rishia as a guinea pig, and the results? A boost to her stats and even more so when reinforced with his Zoai armor. This is when he finally realizes that energy also means aura in this world. An enhanced Rishia was able to speed blitz and almost hurt a prepared Naofumi. Naofumi decides to expedite her training using this method. Chapter 9. What it means to train. The following chapter was very straightforward. Only a week into training, it was becoming evidently clear that the other heroes had grown tired of this all. Naofumi assumed it was because they had yet to grasp the Hengen Muso style after a few sessions, and now the heroes were disappearing, not showing up, or outright refusing to train. After a bit more of excuses, they finally showed their true colors. They were embarrassed and jealous. They claimed that this is all for Naofumi to punish them for not believing in him in the beginning. Naofumi knows it's because they're too lazy and too proud to train and learn from others. This time though, it seemed to be the final straw. The heroes had reached their wits' end, and they go as far as threatening the queen's life so that they can leave Merrowmark and never return. The queen agrees to their demands, but on two conditions. 1. Investigate the monster appearances that have recently begun occurring in countries around the world, and 2. Participate in the next upcoming wave. The other heroes agreed and leave to their prospective destinations. Though not looking to leave anywhere, the queen also asks the shield hero if he could do the same. This chapter ends with a mysterious woman appearing before Naofumi asking him to destroy her as an anime. Confused, he asks for more info but receives none, and when Raphael and Philo show up, he then realizes that this lady had disappeared. Chapter 10. Kigurimi. Before leaving for his mission, Naofumi decides to check in on the progress of his orders and visits that weapon shop. Of the completed projects, Raphtalia's Usasani sword, Philo's Inote's claw, and as for the Peku Kigurumi, it was now a Philo Kigurumi. With their new weapons and gear, Naofumi and his full party, Raphtalia, Philo, the old lady, Eclair, Rishia, and Kyo all head to the village in the southwest. Chapter 11. Familiar. After only a day and a half, they had reached their destination, which also happened to be the village where Naofumi had given an improved version of the bioplant. Seeing the overgrown plant again, Naofumi feared he was no better than Motoyasu, who had originally cursed him with the uncontrolled version. Just then, Philo caught scent of other adventurers she thought was Liark and company, but Naofumi quickly waves this off after catching a glimpse of their hair and gear. Naofumi's worries were also absolved when a villager then appears and explains that the overgrowth was on purpose and they are much better off these days since his help. When they ask about the mysterious monster sightings, a villager brings back a one-eyed bat creature's corpse. Unfamiliar to most, Rishia claims that she has seen it before but she can't remember where. When Naofumi absorbs it into his shield, familiar, bat type. Though it didn't say what monster it was, it did say it was a familiar to something. Soon, a scream pierced the quiet room and the party was soon battling 30 of these bat creatures who shot laser beams from their eyes. Another distinguishing characteristic of all of these monsters was the out-of-place turtle shell on all of their backs. Providing amazing defense, they quickly found that the wings and the eyes were the weak point. While it only took a single hit for Raphtalia, Philo, and the old lady to put those monsters down, it took more than a couple hits from both Eclair and Rishia, and when it came to kill, he can only put down the ones who are already injured. Following their battle, the key intel was that these monsters targeted weaker individuals first, as well as attacking other monsters. Unlike wave monsters that also destroy structures and property, these only targeted living creatures, and lastly, it seems all of the creatures are coming from the same direction, the east. Chapter 12. Getting ahead of the enemy. Returning to the castle through a portal, Naofumi and the other three heroes report their investigation so far. After hearing it all, the other heroes first grew quiet, then lashed out when Naofumi questioned if they knew anything, then immediately left. Taken aback, the Queen and Naofumi agreed that they are behaving strangely and may know more than it seems, so they send shadows to watch after them. Before leaving, Naofumi tells the Queen about the mysterious woman, and the two surmise whatever it is, according to reports in their investigation, is moving east to west. On return, the news only got worse. Kyo had been attacked by one of the creatures and had laid eggs in his back. And as soon as discovery was made, Philo suddenly screamed because she had just witnessed a new monster come out of a deceased monster's body. So, the reason their numbers kept growing was because they laid eggs in the bodies of people and monsters that they killed. This new monster that now stood before them was 2.5 meters tall, covered in fur, with the signature shell on his back. Familiar, Yeti form. The old lady informs Naofumi that a normal adventurer would need to be at least level 45 and have a proficient fighter background to handle this new creature. Again, the creature reminded Rishia of a creature she had read about, and Naofumi implores her to recall the information. It may be the key to defeating this mysterious monster. To make matters even worse, the other heroes never returned to the castle. Chapter 13. Game knowledge bears its fangs. It had only been 3 days since the adventurers had been tasked to investigate, and by the afternoon of day 3, the shadows assigned to tail the other heroes returned to announce their disappearance. From the reports, it seemed to Naofumi they knew exactly what the threat was. Being they already had a head start, Naofumi reaches out to Vittoria via Philo's cowlick, asking her if she could teleport them to that location in the east. But Vittoria explained that this is out of her jurisdiction. Though she knows of the impending threat, she refuses to help due to the heroes still being at odds with each other. It was time for Naofumi to decide whether to save the world or to save its people. After explaining the situation to the queen, Rishia burst in with the answers to all of their questions. She had finally remembered where she saw these monsters, in a book, and the name of their true target, the Spirit Tortoise. The Spirit Tortoise was one of the 4 benevolent animals, the Kirin, Phoenix, Spirit Tortoise, and Dragon, and were similar to the 4 symbols, the Zer Dragon, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, and Black Turtle. So, the hero's plan was to rush ahead to defeat this creature for the drop items, recognition, and praise that they would receive for saving the world. The question that plagued Naofumi's mind was whether the other heroes truly know what they're doing. Ancient heroes of this world sealed the tortoise away, and the method that they had used was lost in time. Were they truly only banking on their game knowledge? Regardless, the plan was to now catch up with the other heroes and deal with what comes next. While en route to catch up with the other heroes, something strange happened. Suddenly, the air was filled with the sound of shattering glass, and a shockwave rocked the carriage. It sounded like the beginning of a wave, but it was somehow different. When Naofumi checked his status window, the wave countdown had seemingly stopped, and in its place, a new timer had begun with the number 7. Then, a shadow appeared, urging them all to return to Melwood Mark immediately. Chapter 14. What it means to be a hero. While a few scenes from this novel had been adapted into the anime, Chapter 14 is where we start to really get back on track. Naofumi and company used Portal Shield to return to the castle and to the bad news. The other heroes had reached their destination, but the tortoise's seal had already been broken and is now heading west, leaving a path of destruction in its path. As for the heroes, since they reached and attacked their target, no one has heard from them. 2 days later, Naofumi heads out with a group of hand-picked knights and a coalition formed from neighboring countries. The reports show so far, 5 cities, 3 forts, and 2 castles have fallen, and many people have died. The group also receives word that the other heroes were in fact still alive to the relief of Rishia. Though most neighboring countries had joined together to form this army, another country had already made an attempt, as we heard about in the anime. They were forced to defend their lands, but of course, failed. Their current plan was to evacuate all of the towns, villages, and forts in the path so that they could then lure it into a safer area for the battle. Once the battle began, the hope is to send Naofumi in to somehow seal his heart, but the problem was while he was inside, the soldiers on the outside are expected to receive mass casualties. Then, Naofumi and the generals head to their meeting. Unlike in the anime, Naofumi realizes before speaking that he would need to play the role of the hero to instill trust and confidence into the generals, since it seemed that all hope was almost lost. His speech seemed to actually move the generals and they had full confidence in him. After leaving the tent and divvying out orders to his own party, they ride off towards the tortoise. Chapter 15. The Spirit Tortoise. The enormous tortoise was right before them, towering, causing small earthquakes at his feet with each step. Believing the time was right, Naofumi switches to his strongest battle shield, Whale Magic Core Shield. This shield ended up being better than his soul-eating shield with his heat beam counterattack and his water elemental type resistances to fire and water attacks. Their battle soon began. Mowing through hordes of familiars, Naofumi watches his party in amazement at how strong they had become, even seeing a new spell from Raphtalia that she had learned from Eclair. This continued until they were all standing in front of the Spirit Tortoise. Just then, the tortoise tried to stomp on the party, but Naofumi seemingly easily defends against it. Through teamwork and support magic, the party manages to deal with the hordes of familiars, and now they can focus all their attacks on the monster. Though powerful, their attacks didn't seem to hurt the tortoise much, and whenever blood was shed, it quickly healed due to his regeneration. The next moment, the tortoise uses two powerful skills. The first seems to be a powerful gravity magic that slams anyone outside of Naofumi's shooting star shield to the ground. The second was a powerful electric cannon that Naofumi just barely managed to switch shields to defend against. Even using his Soul Eater shield, he barely manages to remain conscious, and afterwards, he's so badly injured he couldn't even manage to heal himself. While preparing a powerful attack, the tortoise takes another opportunity to try another stump on the party, then follows it up with another electrical cannon. This time, Naofumi takes the greatest defensive position he's ever. This time though, Naofumi takes the greatest defensive position to date with a shooting star shield, air strike shield, second shield, Dritter shield, and lastly, shield prison. Though maybe even more powerful than his first, Naofumi successfully defends against the attack and sets Philo and Raphtalia for their strikes. As we saw in the anime, the two cut through the Spirit Tortoise's throat and takes his head clean off. They had won, for now. Chapter 16, The Country Above the Spirit Tortoise. With the tortoise defeated, the Shield Party is celebrated, thanked, and treated as the heroes that they always were. But it seemed Naofumi was the only one aware of the still impending danger. Unlike when they completed a wave, the new blue timer had not gone away. Following the banquet, Naofumi decides to climb the Spirit Tortoise's shell in hopes of finding the other heroes. Up top, all that could be found was ruins and bodies of familiars and victims who seemed to live up here. Soon they found what seemed to be a temple where Naofumi found Japanese writing that was ineligible in all the important parts. Outside of that, they also seemed to find what seemed to be a cage leading into the inside of the body, but ultimately a dead end. There was nothing else to be found, so the rest of the investigation had ceased for the day. Epilogue, A Disquieting Place. 3 days had passed and they still had no luck locating the other heroes. Naofumi, Raphtalia, and Philo head to the last town they were last seen to continue their search, but nothing. While leaving, Naofumi hears a mysterious voice, but sees no one. You might be the strongest of the 4 holy heroes, Shield, but this isn't over. Next time, more people will die. And that is the end of our 6th installment. While you could argue that episode 4 was slightly covered, this volume has yet to fully introduce the next character, Ost. If you've already read or seen this season, you may already know how vital she is, so we will leave her for the next volume. Again, I'm really excited to finally cover the events of the 2nd season of the anime, and I'm definitely hoping to hear more info about the coming forth. Be sure you're subscribed and notifications are on because trust, you do not want to miss out on the next volume. Until then, peace.